11 herbs from the Bible, and you've probably already grown one of them without knowing it. That aloe vera on your windowsill, the mint spreading through your herb box. They've been part of the oldest garden pharmacy ever recorded, plants that ancient families grew not for decoration, but because their whole household depended on them. And every single one of them still grows in an ordinary backyard garden today. Cost almost nothing to start, and half of them will survive neglect better than anything at the garden center. One thing before we walk through the list, because honesty matters more than hype. I am not going to tell you these herbs cure anything. These are folk remedy plants, kitchen herbs, and garden workhorses that have been grown in home remedy gardens for thousands of years, long before pharmacies had storefronts. Every one of them doubles as a cooking herb, a pollinator magnet, or both. The growing part is almost embarrassingly simple. Sun, drainage, and a little patience will get you there. Stick around for number 5, because that one runs through more chapters of scripture than any other plant on this list, and it grows in a pot on a porch without complaint. Number 1. Aloe vera. You probably already own one. It sits on the kitchen windowsill in a pot that has not been watered in 2 weeks, and it looks perfectly content. That is the beauty of aloe. It thrives on the kind of neglect that kills everything else in the house. In warmer parts of the country, it grows outdoors year-round in a sunny spot with fast-draining soil. Everywhere else, it lives happily in a container you carry inside before frost. Aloe appears in biblical texts alongside myrrh and cassia, valued enough to perfume linens and used in burial preparations. Folk herbalists have kept close for centuries, using the clear gel inside the leaves for minor burns, dry skin, and small scrapes. You snap a leaf, squeeze the gel out, and smooth it on directly. That is the whole recipe, and it has not changed in a very long time. The one warning is overwatering. Think of aloe like a sponge that is already full. Its thick leaves store moisture, so soggy soil rots the roots before you notice anything wrong. Let the soil go completely dry between waterings, give it bright light, and leave it alone. A single plant costs a few dollars, and it will produce pups, little baby plants around the base, that you can separate and pot up for free. One purchase turns into an endless supply you can share with every neighbor on the block. The next herb on this list does not sit quietly anywhere. Number 2. Mint. If aloe is the quiet one on the shelf, mint is the one trying to claim the entire backyard. Spearmint and peppermint both appear in the Gospels, listed alongside dill and cumin as herbs valuable enough that families tithed a portion of their harvest. And mint grows with an enthusiasm that borders on aggression. That is your one serious warning, and it belongs up front. Mint spreads by underground runners, and if you plant it in a garden bed, it will take over everything within reach in a single season. Grow it in a pot, a deep container with drainage holes, set on a hard surface so the roots cannot sneak out the bottom and tunnel into the ground. That container is your fence. Without it, mint becomes the neighbor who moves in and never leaves. Folk herbalists have brewed mint tea for digestive comfort for as long as anyone can trace. A handful of fresh leaves steeped in hot water makes a tea that tastes clean and bright, and it costs you nothing once the plant settles in. Mint wants part shade to full sun, steady moisture, and room to breathe. It is winter hardy across most of the country, comes back every spring thicker than before, and the real cost is the pot. After that, mint pays for itself every time you skip the tea aisle. The next herb has a story that starts even further back in scripture, and it may already be sitting in your spice cabinet right now. Number 3. Coriander. You might know it better as cilantro, because the fresh leaves and the dried seeds carry different names even though they come from the same plant. In the book of Exodus, when the Israelites found manna in the wilderness, the text compares it to coriander seed. That is how familiar this herb was to ancient households. It served as the everyday reference point for describing something miraculous. Growing coriander is straightforward, with one quirk that catches people off guard. It bolts. That means it races to flower and sets seed in warm weather, sometimes within weeks of sprouting. If you want the fresh leaves for cooking, sow seeds every few weeks through spring and early fall so a new crop is always coming up behind the last. If you want the dried seeds for your spice shelf, let it bolt on purpose, let the flowers fade, and collect the round little seeds when they turn brown. Either way, you win something useful. Give it morning sun and afternoon shade in warm climates, or full sun where summers stay mild. Light, consistent water and well-drained soil. Folk herbalists across the Mediterranean and the Middle East have brewed coriander seed into digestive teas for centuries. One planting gives you fresh greens, dried spice, and the quiet satisfaction of growing a kitchen staple that has been in continuous use longer than most civilizations have lasted. 3 herbs in, and the pattern should feel familiar. Kitchen staples, garden workhorses, and folk remedy basics that ancient families grew right alongside their food. And we are only getting started. Number 4. Dill. Dill appears in the same gospel passage as mint and cumin, listed as a garden herb valuable enough that families offered a portion of their harvest. Dill was a household staple, grown and stored like a crop, not tucked into the corner of a plate. Growing dill is almost comically easy. Drop seeds into loose soil in a sunny spot, keep them damp until they sprout, and step back. Dill sends up feathery green fronds fast, and eventually produces flat yellow flower heads that look like tiny fireworks. Those flowers turn into dill seed, the same spice you find in jars at the store, so one planting gives you both the fresh herb and the dried seed. Full sun, average soil, water when things get dry. That is the whole care floor. Dill does not like being transplanted because it grows a long taproot, so sow it where you want it and leave it there. Folk herbalists have steeped dill seed in warm water as a gentle digestive tea, and the name itself comes from an Old Norse word meaning to soothe. In the kitchen, it lifts a cucumber salad or a pot of soup better than almost anything. And if you let a few flower heads drop their seeds, dill often reseeds itself the following year. You buy seeds once and get dill for seasons after. That is the kind of return a budget gardener lives for. And that brings us to number 5. The one I teased at the beginning. Number 5. Hyssop. Hyssop runs through more books of scripture than any other herb on this list. It appears in Exodus, where it was used to mark doorposts during Passover. It shows up in the Psalms in a verse about cleansing and renewal. And it appears again in the Gospel of John, at the crucifixion. That is a thread spanning centuries of text, woven around a plant so modest you might walk right past it in a nursery without giving it a second look. Hyssop is a woody-stemmed perennial with narrow green leaves and spikes of small blue-purple flowers that bees find irresistible. It looks like a scruffier cousin of lavender, and it asks for about the same care. Full sun, well-drained soil, and very little water once it settles in. According to Harvest to Table, hyssop is hardy across a wide range of growing zones and comes back reliably year after year. It tolerates drought, shrugs off cold, and needs almost nothing from you once established. Folk herbalists across Europe and the Middle East have used hyssop in teas and steam preparations, and as a fragrant herb for freshening stuffy rooms. The leaves carry a minty, slightly bitter flavor that some people enjoy in tea and others find too sharp, so taste a leaf before you brew a whole pot. In the garden, hyssop earns its keep by feeding pollinators from spring through fall with barely any maintenance. A row of hyssop in bloom is a landing strip for bees, and if your vegetable garden needs better pollination, hyssop planted nearby is a gentle way to invite that help. You can start it from seed or from a small nursery plant, and either way the cost is minimal. One plant fills in within a season, and you can divide it every few years to spread it around the garden for free. The next herb has a name you may not recognize, but your grandmother may have kept a jar of its seeds in the back of the cupboard. Number 6. Nigella sativa, often called black seed or black cumin. This one surprises people, because the plant itself is delicate and beautiful. Fine feathery foliage, pale blue flowers, papery seed pods that rattle when they are ready. In the book of Isaiah, the prophet mentions fitches, and scholars widely identify that as nigella, grown alongside wheat and barley as part of the regular harvest. It was food, remedy shelf, and garden beauty all in the same row. Black seed has a long tradition in folk medicine across the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. Herbalists have used it as a digestive spice, a general tonic, and seasoning with a peppery, slightly nutty flavor. The seeds still show up in flatbreads and spice blends across the region today. Growing nigella is a direct sow affair. Scatter seeds on prepared soil in early spring, press them in gently and water until they sprout. The plants grow about a foot tall, bloom in late spring or early summer, and set seed pods within weeks. When those pods rattle, the seeds inside are ready to harvest. Shake them into a paper bag and you have your own supply. Nigella likes full sun and average garden soil with decent drainage. It finishes in one season, but it self-sows freely if you leave a few pods standing. New plants pop up on their own the following spring without costing you another cent. If you are finding ideas here that belong in your own garden, following along really does help, because sharing these old, budget-friendly growing methods is the whole reason this channel exists. Number 7. Rue. Rue is named directly in the Gospel of Luke, listed alongside mint and other herbs that families tithed from their gardens. It has one of the most distinctive looks of anything on this list. The leaves are small, round, blue-green, and almost waxy, arranged in a pattern that looks ornamental even before the little yellow flowers appear. Folk herbalists in the Mediterranean used rue as a bitter digestive herb and an aromatic. The leaves carry a strong, sharp scent that some people describe as musky and others find simply intense. That scent is worth knowing about for a practical reason. According to NC State Extension, rue contains oils that can cause skin irritation, especially when the plant is handled in direct sunlight. Wear gloves when you prune it and wash your hands afterward. That is not a reason to skip the plant. It is a reason to give it the same respect you would give a hot pepper. Rue is a hardy perennial that prefers full sun and well-drained soil. It handles drought, poor ground, and benign neglect, which is exactly the profile a budget gardener wants. It comes back every year, stays compact enough for a pot or a garden border, and looks elegant doing almost nothing. Number 8. Garlic. Garlic shows up in the Book of Numbers, listed among the foods the Israelites missed during their years in the wilderness. They ached for it. That alone tells you how central garlic was to the daily table and the household remedy shelf. Few things in a backyard garden give you more return for less effort than a row of garlic planted in the fall. You push individual cloves into the soil, pointy end up, a couple of inches deep, cover them with mulch and walk away. Through winter, the cloves set roots. In spring, green shoots push up. By midsummer, you pull full bulbs out of the ground, each original clove having multiplied into an entire head. One head of grocery store garlic, broken apart and planted, produces a whole row of new heads the following season. According to Penn State Extension, fall planting gives garlic the cold period it needs for strong bulb development. Folk herbalists across nearly every culture have prized garlic in the kitchen, eaten raw or steeped in honey. In the kitchen, garlic is irreplaceable, and homegrown garlic tastes sharper and sweeter than anything in a grocery bag. Give it full sun, loose soil, and steady moisture through spring. Plant in fall, forget through winter, harvest in summer. One season's harvest gives you both food for the table and seed garlic for next year's planting, so the cycle feeds itself without another trip to the store. Number 9. Cumin. Cumin appears in the book of Isaiah described as a crop handled carefully, beaten out gently, rather than threshed with heavy equipment, because the seeds were too delicate and too valuable to crush. It shows up again in the Gospels alongside mint and dill. Ancient families treated cumin as something worth protecting, and if you have ever noticed the price of a small jar at the grocery store, you understand why growing your own makes sense. Cumin is a warm season annual that looks like a wispy, delicate version of parsley. It grows about a foot tall, produces small white or pink flower clusters, and sets crescent-shaped seeds. Those seeds are the spice you know from chili, curry, and a dozen other dishes. Cumin needs a long, warm growing season to produce seed properly. In southern regions with generous summers, sow it directly after the last frost. In cooler climates, start seeds indoors a few weeks early and transplant carefully once the soil warms, handling the roots gently because cumin does not love being moved. Full sun, light soil, and do not overwater. When the seed heads turn brown, cut the stems and hang them upside down over a tray to catch the seeds as they dry. A small row of cumin can fill your spice jar for the year, and freshly dried cumin is noticeably warmer and more fragrant than the dusty jar that has been sitting on the shelf since last spring. Number 10. Saffron crocus. This one feels almost too good to be real, and yet it is completely ordinary to grow. Saffron, the spice that sells for extraordinary prices per ounce, comes from a small fall-blooming crocus you can tuck into a pot or a garden bed with very little fuss. In the Song of Solomon, saffron appears alongside other precious aromatics, placed in the company of frankincense and myrrh. It was a luxury then, and it still commands premium prices today. The saffron crocus blooms in autumn, not spring, which already makes it unusual. Each purple flower opens to reveal 3 vivid red-orange threads, and those threads are the saffron. You pluck them with your fingers, set them on a paper towel to dry, and store them in a small jar. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, saffron crocus corms can be planted in late summer and will bloom that same fall. Those corms multiply underground over time. Within a few seasons, a small patch can produce enough threads to season a pot of rice, flavor a batch of bread, or steep a cup of saffron tea. Folk herbalists have traditionally used saffron steeped in warm milk as a gentle comfort drink. Plant the corms a few inches deep in well-drained soil in late summer and expect blooms their first autumn. They tolerate cold winters and come back reliably across much of the country. The main mistake is soggy ground where the corms rot over winter. Good drainage, decent sun, and patience. A handful of corms costs less than a takeout dinner, and within a few years your original planting doubles and keeps doubling. You end up harvesting a spice that would cost a small fortune at the store from a flower you planted once. And that brings us to the last herb on this list. One that might be the easiest of all to grow, and one of the most recognized in any written text. Number 11. Mustard. The mustard seed parable is one of the most familiar passages in all of Scripture. A seed smaller than almost anything in the garden, growing into a plant large enough for birds to shelter in its branches. That image has stayed with millions of people across 2,000 years, and the plant itself is every bit as determined as the story suggests. Mustard grows fast, tall, and willing. Depending on the variety, it can reach several feet in a single season, covered in bright yellow flowers that set small round seeds inside slender pods. Those seeds are the mustard you grind for the condiment, the mustard folk herbalists used in warming poultices for sore muscles, and the mustard you can press for cooking oil. Growing it requires almost no thought. Scatter seeds on bare soil in early spring and they sprout within days. Mustard tolerates poor ground, loves full sun, and grows so fast that weeds barely get a chance to compete. The young leaves are edible as peppery salad greens, and the bright yellow flowers bring pollinators into the garden all season. When the pods dry and turn brown, harvest the stalks and crush the pods to collect the seeds. A single plant can produce enough seed to fill a jar and still leave plenty for the next sowing. One caution. Like mint, mustard can spread aggressively if you let it self-sow unchecked. Harvest the seed pods before they split open on their own, or give mustard a dedicated corner where its ambition cannot cause trouble. In a contained space, it is a cheerful, fast-growing, deeply useful herb that gives you greens, seeds, and flowers in one season, all from a seed small enough to lose between your fingers. That is all 11. Aloe vera, mint, coriander, dill, hyssop, nigella, rue, garlic, cumin, saffron, crocus, and mustard. 11 herbs that were already growing in gardens when the oldest texts were being written, and every one of them still thrives in a pot or a bed in an ordinary backyard today. You do not need all 11 this season. Pick 3. Just 3. Choose the ones that match your climate and your kitchen, and get them in the ground or in a pot this month. If your summers run long and warm, try cumin and nigella alongside your garlic. If you want something perennial that comes back on its own year after year, hyssop and mint will take care of themselves. If you want to grow something ancient and quietly extraordinary, plant a handful of saffron corms late this summer and watch for those red threads in October. Picture your garden a few months from now. A row of garlic pushing up through the mulch. A pot of mint on the back step, leaves ready for tea whenever you reach for them. A patch of hyssop humming with bees in the afternoon light. Not one of those plants cost you more than a couple of dollars to start, and not one of them needs you to drive to the garden center twice. These are the herbs your great-grandparents grew without giving it much thought. They did not need a brand name on a bag or a label on a bottle. They just needed a sunny corner and a little patience. And so do you. If this gave you an idea for your own garden, you will feel right at home here, because growing more and spending less is what we do. Drop a comment and tell me which 3 you are starting with.